Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown. "4 years ago, my great-grandmother passed away at the age of 98. We were close all the way into my adult years, so the death hit me hard. She lived in a one-story house in a rural town 30 minutes outside of Springfield, Missouri. Her house sat on a large and heavily forested piece of land. There was a large hill several hundred feet behind the house that dropped off into a creek. I spent almost my entire childhood staying on this piece of land and had learned how to take care of it and the house. After the funeral services, I volunteered to stay and take care of the land, while my family decided on what to do with it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to buy the land, so I wanted to spend as much time out there as I could. My first 3 days, I spent packing up items and cleaning the house. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, so I didn't have to worry about unwanted guests that would get in the way of my packing and disturb my personal way of mourning the loss of someone so close to me. The 4th day is when the odd event started occurring. I slept in a sleeping bag in the living room, and when I woke up, I immediately screamed. A few inches away from my face was a dead copperhead snake. It was normal for snakes and other animals to get in the house, so seeing the snake wasn't surprising. It was the fact that it was so close to my face, and it could have bitten me at any moment while I was sleeping. I briefly wondered why the snake had just come in the house and died because there were no physical signs that anything was wrong with it. So I threw it outside and continued with my day, and the weird event was almost forgotten. Later that evening, I decided to go for a walk through the woods to enjoy the nice weather and reminisce about the good times I'd had in the woods and all the games I used to play. I was walking along an old path that led to a well. The path was narrow and was close to the drop-off that led to the creek. I heard a branch snap behind me and instinctively turned my head. I didn't see anything, so I assumed it was an animal and continued walking. Just a few minutes later, I heard a snap to my left and turned to look again. But I still didn't see anything. I started to worry that I was being stalked by something, but it was rare to see large animals in this area, so I continued walking. I heard a third snap directly in front of me, but now, instead of being worried, I was upset. I was convinced that someone else was out here, trying to scare me, so I shouted at what I assumed to be a person, "Go away!" And everything went uncomfortably silent. But I started to hear footsteps approaching in front of me. But I couldn't see anything. They got faster and faster until whoever or whatever it was running right at me. I covered my face with my arms and waited to be attacked by some invisible person. But the footsteps stopped. I slowly lowered my arms, but instead of seeing a person, a bobcat, or even a bear, I saw a gigantic spider in the middle of a web I hadn't noticed before. If I would have taken one more step, I would have ended up being bitten. I turned and ran as fast as I could through the overgrowth and back to the house. I was spooked, but I was out in the middle of the woods, and sometimes things like this happened. I knew this land and the house well, so I pushed through the night, and the next 2 days, nothing out of the ordinary happened. I started yard work my second week staying out at the house, and it wasn't bad. I'd actually found some old trinkets from my childhood that I'd buried under a tree. While I was picking up fallen branches from a storm the previous night, I noticed a clump of hair was caught in one of them. I remember its color being brown and black, and considered the possibility of it being a rare encounter with a bear, but there were no tracks that I could see. I brushed it off again, but I was starting to think that maybe someone else was staying on the property, and that upset me. I decided to stay up late to see if I could catch the person in the act. Nothing happened until around 2 a.m. I remember everything so vividly because of how terrified I was. It started with branches crunching, and the sound of the wheelbarrow I'd been using earlier falling over. I readied my flashlight and a small knife just in case whoever it was got violent. I heard them stop onto the front porch and pull out the screen door, but they quickly abandoned it and instead started walking around the house. I could hear them scraping something sharp against the house, and I was furious. I stood up and shined my flashlight at the nearest window that I assumed the person was standing there and shouted at them, "I have a weapon! Get off this property now!" Everything stopped, and I was positive that whoever it was had left, until I heard something slam against the window so hard I was surprised it didn't break. My flashlight shined on the person, and at first I wasn't sure what I was looking at. It had long dark hair with eyes that were way too big for its face. Its skin was wrinkled and reminded me of a naked mole rat. It pressed its face against the glass and fogged it up with its breath. I heard it run around the house several times and bang on every wall, window, and door every time it passed them. This went on for hours, and I was too scared to move or do anything. I was completely alone, being tormented by some strange monster. Every now and then I would get the courage to shine my flashlight and caught a glimpse of the thing. Each time I saw it, it looked more animal-like. All I could do was cry and wait for it to go away. Finally, after sunrise, the running and banging stopped, but I didn't dare move until well after 9 a.m. It took all of my courage to open the front door and see what damage had been done to the house and yard after the terrifying experience from the night before. But there was nothing. No footprints, no scratches against the house or broken or cracked windows. It was almost like I'd imagined the whole thing. But I knew what I saw and had experienced was real. Nothing else happened for the rest of my stay there, and by the end of the month, my grandfather came to pick me up and take care of the belongings I'd packed away. I was still terrified by what had happened, but I had almost convinced myself that I'd imagined it, until my grandfather spoke to me. He told me that he was happy that this land was being sold and how much he hated growing up here. When I asked him why, his answer seemed to validate my experience. Now, my grandfather is a serious, no-nonsense man. He was the type of person that stayed quiet, but when he did speak, you'd better listen because it was important. He was a hardened war veteran and devoted Christian, so things like paranormal and supernatural were just fairy tales to him. He made sure to tell his children and me and the rest of my siblings and cousins that. He told me how his mother, my great-grandmother, would always try to scare him and his sister with stories about the land being guarded by monsters. The story says that these monsters, hybrids is what he called them, were the children of falsely accused witches. The people living in the area back when this was going on claimed that the children were part witch and part animal and needed to be killed, so they were left in the forest to die. He said that when the witch children died, they came back as spirits and claimed the woods as their own, and any unwelcome visitors would be tortured until they were literally scared to death. Just how their falsely accused mothers had been scared when they had been killed. My grandfather said he didn't believe in much outside of his religion, but he believed that the hybrids were real, and that he had been tormented by one when he tried to go hunting in the woods for the first time and shot his first deer. He believed he had upset the hybrids by killing an innocent animal and never stepped foot on the land with a weapon, and they finally left him alone. Maybe this is a foolish thing to believe, but I believe that the story my grandfather told me is true, simply because we both had similar terrifying experiences. If I'd had a camera, I would have tried to take a picture of the creature, or if I could draw, I would post a picture of the drawing. I remember every detail about what I saw and will be burned into my memory forever. All of my childhood memories seem tainted now because of this experience, and now I don't think I'm going to miss the land as much as I first thought. It didn't take long for the land and the house to be sold. The hybrids, or whatever is out there, can be somebody else's nightmare. One night was more than enough for me. Dude, you're infinitely more brave than me. I would have been out of there 5,000 at dawn the next day after experiencing that. I was scared even here reading this in my apartment in the middle of the city. Wow, a very strange and scary experience. For you to see the window get fogged up, there had to be something physical there. But then you didn't find any physical evidence the next day. It's too bad you didn't have a gun and a friend with you. If it was physical, then a double tap through the window would have dropped whatever it was. Something keeps getting into bed with me. Advice? I wasn't sure where else to go with this. I'm hoping someone has a logical explanation. Oddly enough, I'm not feeling any fear, but it is scaring the two other people living with me. So it's not just the bed thing. There have been other instances, the second probably being the weirdest of them all. I live with my older sister and my daughter. Starting in 2020, we've had some weird happenings. They've been brief and very spaced out. It began when I spent the night at a guy's house who I'd been dating. We're no longer seeing each other. He gifted me some tea leaves. I adore tea. And a few other things, most of it being food. The only thing I ended up consuming was the tea. About a week afterward, my sister gets up around 4 in the morning, throws something out the door, and comes back in. I hear the front door slam. Our front door is heavy and loud. So I get up and ask her what the heck she just threw out. She told me she threw out the tea because she felt weird about it. And ever since I bought it back, that any time she goes to sleep, she'll wake up feeling like someone is holding her down. Oddly enough, once the tea was gone, her sleep trouble stopped. I chalked it up to sleep paralysis. The whole tea thing was probably a coincidence. Next was the foot incident. One night, I went into my sister's room to talk to her. It's before bedtime. I'm standing in her doorway, joking about something, and I feel a pair of feet, or paws or something, run across the area in front of me. I know that sounds wild, but if any of you have a cat or small animal and have had them walk in front of you, you can feel the pressure of their little paws walking across, and it felt exactly like that. And we do have a cat, so I thought that's what it was. But when I looked down, I saw nothing. I mentioned it to my sister, saying I'm clearly losing my mind, laughing about it. She doesn't laugh, though, and I decide to go to bed. Again, in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m., my sister wakes up with a loud yelp. Not a scream, but a yelp. I run to her room to make sure she's okay, and she says she is, and I go back to bed. I didn't think to ask. I just assumed that she had a bad dream. The next day, once I got home from work, my sister admitted that she woke up because it felt like someone had poked her foot really hard. Again, I thought maybe she was just having hallucinations in her sleep or something. And then there's this curtain incident. I can't remember what time it was, but my daughter came into my room, shaking me awake, and asked if I could put her curtain back up. I thought that was weird that her curtain had fallen in the first place. So I go to her room, put her curtain back up, and tell her the cat probably did it. She tells me the cat hasn't been in her room all night. I shrug and tell her that the cat probably was, but she just didn't see it. Honestly, I was just exhausted and ready to go back to bed. The next day, my daughter tells me that she saw me in the hallway before she came to my room and was surprised to see me asleep. I asked her to clarify because I hadn't gotten up or anything, and she tells me, I saw you in the hallway and then disappear into your bedroom. My curtain fell, and that's when I went to go get you, but I thought it was weird you had gone back to sleep so fast. I feel like I've tried my best to apply logic to all these situations, but what I can't explain so far is the sensation that someone is getting in bed with me. And it's only my bed. I've slept in my sister's, on the couch, my daughter's, and nothing. When I get in mine, every now and then, I feel the pressure of someone getting into bed or jumping onto it at the very edge of it. When I look, there's nothing there. The other night, it felt as if someone was getting on both ends and crawling up the length of my legs. I don't sleep in my bed at night anymore. I'll admit it freaked me out enough to the point that I refuse to sleep in my room at night. And will only take naps in the day, but I almost always feel it in the day too. If I choose to nap elsewhere in the day, it does not happen. I actually just read a post on here that someone was going through something similar, but it was just the springs on their bed. I'm hoping that's what it is. As I stated before, I don't feel any actual fear of it. Well, not anymore, but I am worried because my daughter keeps mentioning hearing noises at night. I've been ignoring it or declaring loudly, "Can you haunt me later? I've got stuff to do." LOL, just to take the edge off. Any ideas about what's going on?